Next speaker, Roberto Orci, President and CEO of Acento. Roberto has over 30 years of experience working in marketing and advertising in Mexico with both Procter & Gamble and Ogilvy Mather. He has also had experience in the United States, and he is the president of the fourth largest independent Hispanic agency in the U.S., or he was until 2002, La Agencia de Orci. Prior to joining Acento Advertising, he led Orci Management Consulting with the mission to guide companies in profitable business growth in the Hispanic market. He's here today to share his expertise with this new American mainstream. Roberto.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back and sticking it out. After all, it's beautiful out there. In fact, if you were lucky enough to be here early, you got to play some golf, and there was 25 golfers. If you didn't do it this year, even if you play once or twice a year, next year, golf in the morning and interview some of these fantastic interns in the afternoon. It'll be great use of your time. Over the last few hours, we've been talking about innovation. I've learned a lot, and there's also been talk about changing how we do things and adapting, and in some cases, surviving. What I want to talk today about is growth. One of the things that we hear a lot from businesses is that sales are flat, or else we hear that the target audience is shrinking, or else we hear things like the disposable income, it's flat, stagnant, it's not working for us. Yet, despite that, I'm here to talk about growth. One of the questions that we get asked a lot from businesses is, how can I do more with less? Well, I could answer that question three ways. One, how about you change your campaign strategy, your whole marketing approach? It's the cleaning house approach. Another thing you might do, two, is switch to non-traditional media. Drop television, go to online. Now, just taking advertising from one media vehicle to another may not be the best thing. A third possible strategy is fire your ad agency. I'm an ad agency, so I don't recommend that unless the conditions are pretty dire. But it's something you have to consider. Now, if you took these suggestions, any one of those three, the best you could hope for is the status quo, because nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. You know the status quo, new media, change your promotions, do a few things, the tried and true, the things that you won't get in trouble for doing because everybody's always done them. However, you don't get much results from that. So that's not going to work anymore. So I have a suggestion. Let's obliterate the status quo. You have to think outside the box. You have to go beyond the general market, because if you are looking for double-digit growth, the general market is not the next big thing. So what is? Where can you go for the next big thing? Is there growth anywhere out there? Well, let's take a look. Today, salsa outsells ketchup. And you know that Hispanic bilingual animated character, Dora the Explorer? She outsells Barney. And I had breakfast this morning, so I can tell you that tortillas outsell bread. And that's amazing. Why is it happening? The Hispanic market. Last month, the census announced that the Hispanic market just passed 50 million people. That's 1 in 6 Americans today are Hispanic. Now, if you look at where we are now, in the West and the Southwest, between Texas and California, 35% of the population is Hispanic. And that's pretty dramatic. In fact, this growth that we see here is happening everywhere, and it's because of one thing, growth. Hispanic population grew 43% since the last census. Compare that to the 5% for the rest of the market. And look on this next map here. Wherever you look, even in unexpected places like the West, the East, the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest. The Hispanic population is booming, double digits. Look at any state, pick your hometown, double, triple-digit growth. That has very dramatic consequences. Now, there are some things that surprise me. One, only 6% of measured media today is spent on this dramatic, growing market. And only 200 of Fortune 500 companies have jumped on board. Now, actually, rather than a negative, for you it's a positive. Think of it as first mover advantage. What a great opportunity. Even if you are in Hispanic marketing, if you're active in it, the opportunities are still limitless. So there's so much more that you can do beyond what you're doing. You don't have to speak Spanish to know what mucho dinero means. Do I have to translate for anybody? You know, I call that the new America. It's not only are Hispanics, when we come to this wonderful country, we get Americanized. But you, believe it or not, especially here in the Southwest, you're getting Hispanicized. And I guarantee you, if we talk about your diet, the things you like, and what it's like, how you feel when you go to the Northeast or Boston, I'll bet you feel like you're in another country. And in some cases, you are. So we wanted to know what some of the top CMOs and VPs of companies had to say about the Hispanic market. And you know, one of the things certainly is important is the youth of the market. They had a lot more to say about the market, and you can, if you want, you can go to our website and see the whole interview. We talked to Macy's in New York, to Best Buy in Minneapolis, to Wells Fargo in San Francisco, and in the next segment you'll see a clip of our visit to New Jersey with Verizon. They have a lot of great things to say, and they tell us why they're so bullish on the market. And they know something that a lot of companies don't, and that is that the lifetime value of a Hispanic consumer is greater than any other segment. Look at these numbers, they're dramatic. And there's 3 reasons why. First, we start families earlier. That's an expensive proposition, but that's the fact. Second, we buy homes sooner. So you know those weekends at Best Buy, or at Home Depot rather, they start a lot earlier. And the third reason is that we retire later. Work more years, retire later. All these things lead to a much greater lifetime value. Now, since we're all fans of retail, wouldn't it be great if these customers were also enthusiastic shoppers? Well, they are. They over-index in expected things like kids' clothes, household items, but they also over-index in some of the things that you would not expect, like technology, internet, television, ebook readers, iPads, tablet PCs, even 3D television. They over-index significantly compared to the general market. Now, Hispanics are also much easier to reach than you would expect. All those 50 million people, you can reach the majority of them on just 2 networks, Univision and Telemundo. And these 2 televisions reach not only Spanish-speaking Hispanics, but also bilingual and in many cases, English-speaking Hispanics. Now, 3 more facts about how easy it is to reach them. 78% use the internet as a primary source of information. And what that means is that they go online, look at what they're trying to shop, and then they go to your store. In fact, when we talked to Best Buy in Minneapolis, they said that a lot of their customers walk in with printouts from the website and say, I want this, so they'd researched it. Another fact is that 90% of Hispanics own a cell phone, which opens up tremendous opportunities for mobile marketing. We've been very successful doing mobile promotions with our clients and driving people either to a point of sale, to a website, or to a telephone number. And the third point about reaching them is that they use Facebook more than anyone. We're very social, and we have taken the social media and applied that to our lives, which means that if they like what you're selling, they will tell everybody about it. And the inverse is true. If they don't like what you're selling or doing, they'll also tell everybody about it. So we see the market is big, but what about the future? Economists tell us that by 2015, which is only 3.5 years away, the buying power will be $1.5 trillion. That is up from $1 trillion in 2010. Earlier this afternoon, Jesse Courier, who'll be speaking tomorrow, showed me an article from Women's Wear Daily. And the article said, why do companies go overseas to find a market when the Hispanic market at $1 trillion is bigger than the GDP of all but 14 countries in the world? So, begs the question, why not take that as a market all by itself? Another interesting point is, given some of these economic issues, is what if immigration slows down? Well, today, in states like California, Arizona, and Texas, Hispanics account for about half of all births. And in the national scope, it's 1 in 4 births. What that means is that the market is here, and the market is now. So it's essential to be aggressive. Let's check back with the experts, including Mike Ritter from Verizon, and see what they have to say about that. So it's important to be aggressive. It's important to get involved now, but it's equally important to be relevant. Here's why. Hispanics embrace the American dream. However, we have a slightly different value system. Even if you speak English exclusively, you do have some differences. Let me show you what I mean. Americans see themselves as individuals. We see ourselves as part of a family. Americans stress informality in relationships. We stress respect. Our kids, Americans instill individuality. That's what they teach them. We teach our kids to be respectful of authority. And in things like who do we rely on for help, institutions are a large part of the American system, whereas in our case, we rely on family and friends. This old image that we have, or that we used to have about assimilation, was the melting pot. But that doesn't apply today. It's irrelevant. It's gone. We retain our culture over time, and that includes things like food, like music, like how we treat our friends and our language, and then we add another layer of American culture. And that includes things like the clothes we wear, the work ethic, and technology. Understanding this new model is critical to be successful in this segment. So, if you want to grow your business, the facts, the figures, the experts, they all say the same thing. You can. The next big thing really is the U.S. Hispanic market. So I thank you, and I encourage you to do the right thing starting now. I'll be glad to take any questions. Yes?
I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and it's 85% Hispanic. I don't live there anymore, but my friends' parents didn't teach them Spanish, so they were a generation of kids who didn't speak Spanish. Now, I think that my generation is teaching their kids Spanish, but so when you're marketing to them, do you market on your web, online, or however you're marketing to them, do you market in Spanish or both, or how do you do it?
That's a really good question. There's a couple ways of approaching it. One is, when we do campaigns, we always do it as in conjunction with the rest of our marketing partners. So our clients will have general market agencies, Asian, African American, Hispanic agencies. We always try to portray one voice for the company, and however, we treat it a little bit differently based on the culture that we're looking at. We also can go a separate level, which is we've also produced advertising in English aimed at Hispanics. And Texas is one of those places where we would run that. But all this is done in combination with the total market in mind.
So in the same language that they would speak, but in English?
Yes, and the reason is that because culture is much more than language. Much more language. You can talk to somebody in English, but you may not be reaching them in their heads or their hearts. Mm-hmm. Yes? What holds companies back from marketing to Hispanics?
Yes.
Well, a few things. One is there's a belief that Hispanics, because of the birth rate that we talked about being born in the US, that they now speak English, therefore they don't need to be reached in language. And that's a big mistake because of the cultural issues that we talked about. Another reason is myths. There are some myths that Hispanics can't afford my product. We had some fascinating cases. When we started doing advertising for American Honda, Honda was the number 5 brand in the US in terms of Hispanic sales. After 1 year, the Accord was the number 1 brand, and after 2 years, Accord and Civic were the number 1 and 2 brands, and they were the top of the line products. So there's a lot of misunderstandings and myths which need to be dispelled. And the third reason, which is probably the most common, is that there is a trepidation of doing something that you might not be expert in. So how do I judge a Hispanic campaign if I myself am not Hispanic? How do I make sure that I'm not taking money out of a sure thing or something that we've done forever that may not be giving me the results I want and putting it as something that I've never tried? So that difficulty in adapting is very important. Yes?
Roberto, quick question for you. You talk about 50 million Hispanics. Are they all the same in Florida and Chicago? Do you just talk to them as one bucket? And my second question is, as a retailer, you only have to look into how you reach them or also your product inventory?
From one Hispanic culture to another, it isn't one monolithic culture. So there are some things that apply to all, and then there are things that you can do to regionalize, much the same as you would in Texas. You know, the beer companies are fantastic at marketing nationwide, but there's also some campaigns that are aimed at that very specific culture or in the Northeast. So we take that into account, and you can do that using a combination of national and local media. The other question is fascinating, and that is, do you have to change your brand or your products or your product line, or do you talk to the customers about them differently? Our experience is that you don't have to change your product in most cases. And I'll give you a really good example. Super Value is one of our fantastic customers, and they have chains, whole grocery chains across the country like Albertsons in the West and in the Midwest, Jewel Osco. We talk to customers in Spanish about that chain, and what we do is we talk about it from the aspect of what's important to them. So a Hispanic customer, food, the dinner occasion is a very important part of how the family lives its life and the extended family. So we position it from that perspective as opposed to a slightly different position in the general market. However, it's all under the same umbrella, which is we are your neighborhood store. It's just that my neighborhood is a little bit different than your neighborhood. The same thing with Wells Fargo Bank. Wells Fargo customers, on the English side, they're very sophisticated. They like online banking, mobile banking. Those are all things that are important to them. In our case, because we are forming families, we're buying homes, we're learning how to save for the future, they want a relationship with a banker. So we take the same products, but we encourage them to go into the bank and get some information that they wouldn't otherwise have. So generally, no, you don't have to change your chicken wings if you're Kentucky Fried Chicken to appeal to Hispanics. You just say, here's a big bucket for your whole family. It's true, by the way, I did that once. Yes?
In a retail setting, sorry.
Does a customer have different expectations from
As far as
customer service?
Yeah, different, I guess, ways to approach a customer.
Yes and no. They expect the same good service. They expect to get the information they need. They want to be respected. The only difference is that in many cases you might not be able to convey it in Spanish or just in English. And I'll give you a good example. One of the things that Best Buy does is they have what they call their blue shirts or their associates, sales associates. They get a lot of feedback from the associates year-round, and they're even organized to get that feedback, so they have the Hispanic blue shirts. And one of the things they learned was that because Hispanics they shop for information online, that they made a huge decision, which is their website, which is for buying, they're going to have the same products, the same prices, but in Spanish on their website. So you could toggle literally between Spanish and English. So you saw it in English, you saw it in Spanish, same product, same great price. And that was very important because, like I said earlier, they print out their things and take it to the store, or they buy online. So that was huge. So is it a different expectation? No, I want the same information. I just want to be able to acquire it the same way in the language that I'm more comfortable in. Yes?
What about marketing to the Anglo market from Hispanic tailors? And I have been in many Mexican restaurants in the U.S., and they don't taste like Mexican food at all. Taco Bell is Taco Hell. But there are original Mexican restaurant food also in many places across the U.S. How do you market those food gourmets to the Americans, to the whites? Because when you go to the fast food and you go to Panda Express, you find Chinese people serving. If you go to Taco Bell, you find Mexicans there serving. So that does gives the originality of the food.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen also in Europe Mexican restaurants served by Germans, and you know how it tastes.
The first part of your question was, how do you
market as an Hispanic retailer? How do you market to the Anglo market?
Oh, I see. Well, I'll tell you, it's the exact same. I would treat it the same way as I would treat how do you market general market products to Hispanics. And that is, what is it about your product or service that's relevant? Like, everybody likes Mexican food, so even though it's not the same as Mexico City food, in fact, they probably adapted somewhat so it appeals to American tastes. So you have to find out what's important and relevant and then take that. I can't make excuses for Taco Bell. And yes, even some of the bigger chains don't have the same kind of Mexican food that you would find in other countries, or in Mexico certainly. So I would just call it a version of, yes, Tex-Mex, as we call it.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. There are so many subsets of the Hispanic or Latino culture.
Yes.
Just even within Mexico itself, not to mention Central America, Cuba, South America, and all of the countries in that area of the world. How are you recommending to capture all of that with this one prescription, your chart, and basically just saying it varies by, localizing your media strategy? Am I understanding that correctly? Because I feel that there's a lot of demographic as well as socioeconomic differences for a variety of Latin populations in this country.
Yes. I was oversimplifying to make a point, which is that the basic values are different. In fact, I'll give you one further. A Mexican in Mexico is dramatically different than a Mexican in the US. And that's because we had, those of us who immigrated here have one thing in common, and it's not the language. It's that we're all here now, and we're all building a different life. So if you were to look at advertising and marketing in Mexico, it looks totally different from what we do here. I oversimplified, but that doesn't take away from the fact that even in the Hispanic market, there are a dramatic number of segments, not just women and kids and families. It goes much deeper than that. There are segments that are driven by attitudes, by desires, by needs, by life stage. So when we do our marketing and our planning, we take all that into account, and then we use either different media vehicles or creative units to address those differences. So we might have some differences, but a lot of the foundation might have some similarities. Because there are things that we do share, and those things can be the backbone of your strategy and then adapted based on the specific target segment. That's a good question, by the way. Thank you.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I'm going to make the assumption then that any acculturalization you would have to your benefit is going to be a big asset. If you can speak.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
If you can speak.
Oh, yeah, get real close. Kiss it,
If you can
kiss it,
speak
kiss
the
it.
language, if you know the customs, any acculturalization you have with Latin America is going to be an asset, a tremendous asset to your company, I would assume.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I'm making the assumption
Yes.
that acculturization to Latin America is going to be a huge asset if you speak the language, if you know the customs. And I don't know if there's any companies that exist that are sort of helping to strategize with that.
So if you're from Latin America,
If you're not.
If you're not from
And you
Latin
need to
America.
become familiar with the culture.
if you're not from America, then it's easier to acculturate?
No, you would need to in order to be able to make inroads into the marketing.
Oh, I see what you mean. As a consumer or as a marketer?
As a marketer.
As a marketer. There's something really interesting, and since I worked in Canada and Mexico and the US, and I've done international work, there is one thing that no matter who you're marketing to, it's understanding the unique markets. You don't have to be acculturated, or you don't have to be Latin American. You don't have to be French Canadian to be successful. You have to, first of all, pick good partners. You have to have good information, do your homework. I think what Martha Stewart said about what the key was, it was HW, it's hard work. It's the exact same thing. So there are no disadvantages. We have in our agency, in our different divisions, we have Hispanics, we have general market people, we have Asians, and they all have one thing in common. They're very sharp. So that's not, I don't think that's a barrier. Was that your question? Close? I'll talk to you after lunch, Constantina. Any more questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you all very, oh yes, one more.
One more question. Do you, you spoke about the two channels that you have access for marketing on television. Can
Two
you-
of many, yes.
Well, you mentioned those two. Do you notice a difference and the success marketing on those channels? Are you able to gauge how successful you are marketing on those channels compared to the traditional cable or the regular major network channels?
Yeah, good question. One of the great things about being such a technological society here is that we get tons of information. So we advertise on those network channels, we advertise on cable, online, mobile, and our marketing partners on the general market side advertise on those channels. So because we measure just about everything we do, we have DR clients, direct response, we get to see the efficiencies of the different media, the different time slots. Even between Hispanic channels, we see sometimes more efficiencies in one versus another. So we can compare what's a dollar worth in this channel in Spanish and what's a dollar worth in this channel in English, or in this website, or in this mobile vehicle. And what we've seen is that there is much greater efficiency using not only these channels, but the right combination of channels. And part of it could be that we're less jaded than most Americans to advertising, including internet advertising. We're under-marketed to in general. We get fewer direct mail pieces, we get fewer banners, we get fewer commercials. So, and we're also information hungry. Therefore, if you give me information in a way that's relevant, I'll respond to it. So we've seen huge efficiencies by doing the right combination of creative and media vehicles. So yes, that's something that's really important. Frankly, we have to convince clients constantly that they're doing the right thing investing in this market. So we take that as part of our process. Well, thank you all very much. Enjoy the cocktail.